Oh, hi there, Whitefish. How you doing today? Oh, isn't it beautiful out? Love this May weather. So guess what? Today we have John Muhlfeld, the mayor, coming to stop by to talk to us about how the city works, what you should do if you want to become part of the city government, and what it's doing to combat some of its biggest challenges. It's a great conversation, and we're really excited to have the mayor here for our very first episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Thrivers Coffee. Thrivers Coffee is an organic, fair trade blend roasted right here in Whitefish, Montana, with all profits going to combat human trafficking. Visit thriverscoffee.com to order your coffee and make a difference in the fight against human trafficking. Big shout out to Big Sky City Lights for the wonderful theme song. Thanks, guys. That's truly a banger. And now, my interview with the mayor of Whitefish, John Muhlfeld. Well, John, thank you so much for being here on my first episode of Hello Whitefish.
My pleasure.
Awesome. How you doing today?
Doing well.
Awesome.
Doing
yeah.
Beautiful day out there. Looking forward to a bike ride.
Nice.
No council meeting tonight, so that's good.
Oh, right on.
So,
where are you going to go bike ride?
Haskell Basin.
Rad.
It's usually my go-to.
And it's Indigenous Peoples Day today, too.
It is. Absolutely.
Important day, especially for Montana.
Certainly honor the holiday.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
That's great.
Yep.
So you are the mayor of Whitefish, and I'm going to give you a brief introduction. John is the current mayor of Whitefish, Montana. His responsibilities include the Fire Department Strategic Planning Committee, real estate advisor to the city manager. That's Dana Smith, right?
Correct.
Yep. Whitefish Lake Institute Board of Directors, Whitefish Strategic Housing Planning Steering Committee, alternate on the Whitefish Sustainable Tourism Management Planning Steering Committee, and you do all of this as a volunteer.
We do. All of the city councilors volunteer their time,
including
to serve this community,
and even being a mayor. This is a volunteer job.
I think we're the only community within Montana that still has a volunteer board, and that's embroiled in our charter, and it was adopted by the voters. When our charter was formed, and it would take a charter change to actually change that to actually have sitting councilors and the mayor compensated.
That's pretty remarkable. So, and you also have your own business as well.
Correct. So I have a private consulting firm, River Design Group. We employ about 30 employees. We have an office here in Whitefish, as well as Corvallis, Oregon, and a small satellite office in Boise, Idaho. And we do specialized water resources engineering projects for state and federal government, nonprofit organizations, tribal governments, et cetera. So a lot of our work focuses on the recovery of endangered species, river and floodplain restoration, aquatic habitat restoration, and we're heavily invested in the Northwest in actual dam removals. So we work fairly closely with utilities on antiquated dams that require removal when they go to relicense with the federal government.
Damn, that's amazing.
Literally. So it's a fun job. I spend a lot of time on the road between the months of June and October, mostly in Montana, just overseeing construction projects, so restoration.
Wow. How did you get into that line of work?
Well, when I first moved here, I landed a job with the Forest Service. So I was a soils and water specialist on the Kootenai National Forest, just about an hour north with the Murphy Lake Ranger District, Kootenai National Forest. After about 3 years working for the federal government, I went to work for the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation in Missoula. And I worked for the Trust Land Management Division, largely helping author the State Forest Land Management Plan. So after a number of years, I transferred to Kalispell and then realized government really wasn't where I wanted to work for the rest of my career. So I went and worked for a few different consulting firms before launching River Design Group here in Whitefish back in 2003 with my business partners.
That's great. Yeah. And what led you then to the path to become mayor?
Well, ironically, I had volunteered back in, I believe it was 2002, to sit on the Whitefish Lake and Lakeshore Protection Committee. At the time, Jim Stack was chairman. I became the vice chairman, and there was a vacancy on city council that came up after Tom Murray vacated his 4-year position after 2 years. And so there was a vacancy, and it required that the city council appoint and ratify a new council member to fulfill Tom's 4-year term. I was contacted by Nick Palmer, who was on council at the time, and I knew Andy Fury, of course, who was mayor at the time, to throw my name in the ring, which I did. And so I interviewed, I believe, Sarah Fitzgerald, also interviewed. She would have done a fantastic job given the fact that she had already served as a city councilwoman years prior. But I was fortunately selected by the council at that time to fulfill Tom's 2-year or 4-year term, the remainder of his 2 years. And from there, I ran for a successful term as a city councilor for 4 years before running for mayor, I believe, in 2011.
Let's pivot and talk about, like, how does the city actually work? Because Whitefish is a small town, but there's so much that's happening in a town like this with tourism, so many people coming in and out. So what are the different departments that kind of make up the city? If you could kind of give us an overview of how that happens.
It's a good point. I mean, we're still a small town. We'd like to think a small community, but we certainly have the complexities of a much larger municipality, and it's a challenge. We're a strong city manager form of government in contrast to, for example, Missoula, where former Mayor John Engen, it was a strong mayor city council form of government. So we're a bit different in terms of how we operate at the city level. We have a city manager that's hired to run the day-to-day operations. She functions as the chief executive officer for the city, whereas my role is working with Dana, our city manager, on both short and long-term priorities for the city, setting agendas, running city council meetings, and obviously serving on volunteer boards outside of the regularly scheduled city council meetings. So a very strong form of city manager council form of government. It's a slightly different model than other municipalities, whereas, for example, John Engen was the paid CEO and also functioned as the mayor of Missoula. We have 6 departments at the city. We have Public Works, Department of Parks and Recreation, Department of Administration, of course, Fire and EMS, Police Services, as well as our legal department. So about 6 different departments comprise the city. And of course, we have 6 elected council members. They serve 4-year terms, and those cycle every 2 years where we have a general election.
And it seems like it's a pretty strong council right now. Like, it seems pretty diverse. You've got like members of the community, you've got business owners, having followed it for pretty years. And I love to watch like the city council meetings. I find them so interesting, sometimes entertaining.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
It's hard to sometimes keep a straight face up there.
Oh man, it's great. And when do the city council meetings happen?
The first and third Monday of each month. And
That's right.
The meetings start at 7:10. In honor of, or in memory of, Chet Hope, who served on city council, as you probably knew Chet, back in the day. So apparently he was consistently late for meetings and would roll in at about 7:08, 7:09. So via, I believe, ordinance or resolution, the meetings now start at 7:10 in honor of former councilor Chet Hope.
Oh, that's amazing. He and his whole family are just such a special family.
Absolutely.
So that's a great way to remember them.
It is.
So what happens at a city council meeting, and what is the purpose of them, and kind of like why are they important?
So most Mondays we typically meet earlier than the regular meeting. For example, most of our work sessions that are, again, open and advertised for the public to participate typically begin between 5 and 6 p.m. We regularly host interviews for the 20 plus volunteer boards that we make appointments to within the city. So we have a lot of volunteer board appointments that we make. A lot of the agenda items that come to the city council are fairly complex, as you know, not only for the council to digest, but also for the general public. So oftentimes our more complex agenda items, such as transportation planning, affordable housing, city budget, as an example, we hold work sessions in advance of the regular meeting in order to give the public as well as the council an opportunity to ask questions and better understand the content of what we will be discussing during the regular meeting, which again begins at 7:10. And typically those more complex work session topics, warrant public hearings during our regular meeting. So that's kind of what happens at the work sessions. The council does not take action during a work session. We're not allowed to. All actionable items are posted to a regular agenda. And during our regular meeting, we take public comment at the beginning of the meeting. Folks are invited to comment and provide input to the city on any matter that's not advertised that evening for a public hearing. We hear volunteer board reports, both from volunteers from the audience as well as city council members. And then we typically roll into our adoption of the consent agenda, which translates from the prior meeting. That usually goes fairly quickly, perhaps with some additions and edits to the minutes, and that moves us pretty quickly, typically, depending on the nature of public comment, into our public hearings for the evening. And those typically involve ordinances that require a vote of the council for passage, and on all ordinances it requires a supermajority vote of the elected officials, so at least 4 of the 6 city council members voting in the affirmative or in opposition for a particular ordinance. We also have resolutions that are considered, and then we typically hear from individual department directors, whether it's Public Works, Parks and Rec, Fire and EMS, Police, on other matters that need to be brought to the attention of the council.
It's really interesting. I remember I was listening to one, I think it was because we have, a lot of cannabis stores now, that new resolution or ordinance passed allowing them within city limits. And I know there was a proposition for a new cannabis dispensary in town, and it was interesting to hear I think I have Dave Taylor who was talking about making sure it meets all of the regulations and stuff like that, and then hearing the opposition to the dispensary. And so it was kind of interesting to hear the objective arguments and the subjective arguments. Yep. Obviously it's it elicits some emotion for certain people, and just kind of seeing how the council, I feel, very successfully navigated the emotional aspect of that versus the objective, making sure it's just legal, and
sure.
How it did a really good job of, I think, deciding. I think it decided in favor of the dispensary moving forward. But seeing how that all played out, I was like, wow, this council is very listens to every side, and I think does make a proper decision without being, you do have to take into account the emotions of the people that live
sure.
around the community. Yep. And how that is going to affect them, but also just being well, this is, you can't say no just because you don't like it.
That's
there
right.
has to be a really good reason.
Yep.
So
and typically you obviously have to default both to local zoning as well as state law.
Yeah.
In the case of dispensaries, similar to other applications where we receive many, we try to streamline the public process or the application process through an administrative permit, which the zoning administrator, Dave Taylor, who's also the director of planning and building, can issue administratively for a conditional use permit. In the event where we do receive significant public opposition or comment, much like the dispensary on Baker, kitty corner to the post office, which is the one I believe you're referring to.
Yep.
We did receive substantive comments, so he elevated that from an administrative permit to a full conditional use permit that was considered that evening by the city council. And what folks don't understand is, we obviously can't supersede state law. Despite being a charter city, we can't be more regulatory than what state law allows. And in this case, dispensaries are obviously buffered from churches, schools, other public facilities, and in this case, and you're dictated by where you measure, based on what the legal address of the business is compared to the vicinity to the church or the school.
Yep.
And in this case, they certainly were within 300 or were not within 300 feet of a school or a church, for example. And so we really had no choice but to approve, despite across the street being a drug-free school zone sign on the corner of the road, which did come up during discussion. The nature of that sign, no one can really put their finger on.
Yeah, so, that's funny. And then you've got a liquor store right across the street from the Catholic Church.
That's right.
Which, it's...
Yeah. But it was properly conditioned.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be a tasteful addition to town, despite whether or not you support dispensaries or not. We have pretty, as everyone knows in Whitefish, we have pretty strict building standards, in terms of signage and dark skies and landscaping requirements. So that guarantees that at least the business, whether you support it or not, will be done and completed, tastefully.
That's great. What should someone do if they want to become city council member? What's that whole process, and what do you think makes a good city council member?
Good question. Well, if you would like to become a city council member, that's the one drawback. So when we consider being paid or not paid, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because there's a lot of folks who have expressed interest in running for city council, primarily younger folks that just can't afford to carve the time out of their weekly schedule to put the time in that's required, because they're busy working 40, 50, 60 hours a week to make ends meet. So it's very unfortunate that we can't offer paid or compensation for the time that is required of the position, because I do think it detracts primarily from getting some younger generation of folks, involved with city government. And then on the flip side, folks that can afford the time typically have been here, while they're grounded. They have better paying positions or jobs in town and can afford to donate the time.
Yeah.
But in order to get involved, I highly encourage. It's very gratifying and rewarding. It's one of the most gratifying things I've ever done in my life. It's get involved. I mean, start coming to planning board meetings, start coming to council meetings, because if an individual does elect to run for city council, you have to be able to hit the ground running pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I share that from experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say it took me, and I know that other councilors share this experience, at least 1 year to where you feel pretty comfortable navigating, the agenda, the public comment, and the complexities of the city. So if folks are out there that are considering a run for council, I highly encourage you to do so. But try to start attending meetings in advance of filing with the elections office in Kalispell.
It's complex. There's so many complex issues, like just dealing with, someone comes and they want to build something on the lake. And there's so many rules or zoning regulations as far as like what you can do on the lake and how that gets decided. I mean, you really do have to know your ins and outs of these rules and regulations in zoning. I feel like if you're going to be a good city council member. Yeah,
I mean, you're essentially functioning as a judge and juror on a lot of land use decisions. Unfortunately, we have a wonderful, very talented staff. I mean, Whitefish is very fortunate to have the staff that we do, from the directors all the way down to the folks that work seasonally for the city, because they're very committed. They're very knowledgeable on their subject matters, and the reports and the information that were provided in our packets in advance of the meeting is extremely helpful in terms of preparation. And oftentimes our packets exceed 800 pages, and so it takes a while just before you even step foot in the meeting, which typically lasts 5 to 6 hours. You have an equivalent amount of time on the front end, wading through the information. I will say, once you're seasoned and you have some years under your belt, you don't literally read all 800 pages. You know the stuff that's important and how to navigate the packet more effectively.
Gosh, you need to do like an Audible version where you can like speed it up and listen to it at like 2.5 times. Whitefish has a resort tax that is, from what I understand, has been pretty successful in a variety of ways. What is the resort tax, and what does that money go towards?
So the current allocation, state law allows municipalities with the resort-based economy that has a certain population threshold, I believe it's 10,000, to adopt a local option sales tax, which Whitefish voters did a number of years ago. At the time, we went with a 2% sales tax versus maxing it at 3%. And back in 2015, through a voter ballot, we were able to increase the resort tax to 3% to help fund the Haskell Basin conservation easement and the protection of our municipal water supply. So of the 3%, that 1% is immediately siphoned off to cover the debt service associated with that conservation easement. I'm happy to say that we paid that debt service off well in advance of the 10-year bonding cycle that we had.
Wow.
So that's good news for voters.
Great.
The balance of the resort tax, 65% of the revenues go towards street projects. So the reconstruction of existing roads, sidewalks, curb, gutter, water, sewer mains. 25% of the total collections is rebated back to property owners for property tax relief.
Oh.
And then about 5% goes to parks for maintenance, acquisition of parkland equipment, et cetera. And then, of course, the merchants that actually collect the tax are provided about 5% of the total revenue, just to help cover their cost of managing the receipts and, of course, paying the city on a quarterly basis or monthly basis. I forget what its schedule is. So we recently went out to the voters, just being a little proactive. Our resort tax was reauthorized a number of years ago, and we're more or less grandfathered in despite what state law does now. As you know, the legislature is not a big fan of local options sales taxes. Kalispell, other towns who are struggling with infrastructure costs and wanting to not shoulder the residents, with all of the tax burden for infrastructure, have been lobbying the state legislature for, it's gone on forever now, to increase the population threshold so that they can adopt a sales tax, and that's been largely unsuccessful. Your point, though, is, or my point being, when we reauthorized it, I believe it was last year, we went back to the voters with a reallocation that will go into effect, I believe, July 1st, 2025. It's a slight adjustment to the current percentage. Of course, the 1% that was used for the bond relief for Haskell Basin goes away.
Yeah.
So we had 3% to work with. So the allocation remains very similar. We changed some of the language with the street improvements to allow for new improvements, new streets, versus just reconstructing existing streets and right-of-ways. And then we earmarked a small percentage to the Whitefish Trail for ongoing operations and maintenance. I think the city recognizes, we own the easements, we own the licenses, the city, not Whitefish Legacy Partners.
Oh, okay.
And so we recognize that at some point in time, hopefully not in the near future, in the event Legacy Partners dissolves, we would have this continuous stream of funding to help support the trail system, the maintenance of the trailheads, in addition, of course, to the incredible endowment that the Legacy Partners has been able to establish for long-term operations and maintenance as well.
Wow.
The resort tax has been largely successful. It's a tax I think we can all celebrate. All of the street projects in town that you see underway, perhaps the exception being a portion of Spokane Avenue today, has been paid for in large part by resort tax and not on the shoulder of taxpayers. So it's pretty remarkable for a town of our size to be able to accomplish what we have. I mean, we can all look back 20 years when you would lose a wheel going down Summers Avenue into one of the 2-foot potholes that would surface. But, given the escalation in costs and inflation these last 2 years, we were fortunate this year in the fact that our resort tax revenues exceeded budgeted, or what was expected to be generated last year. And so the reason why we held taxes at current levels for 2023, meaning no tax increases, was because we were able to take that additional resort tax revenue and put it towards additional property tax relief for residents. So while a lot of communities costs are increasing, general property tax, mill levy rates are increasing, we've been able to hold ours flat, and that's because of the resort tax.
That's amazing. And the fact that some of it goes back to property owners for really property tax.
Yeah, that's the only reason we were able to sell it back in the day when we went out to the voters originally. It was that specifically that we would rebate back 25%. That was the selling point. And it passed by a very narrow margin.
Wow.
So, but as you saw with the Haskell Basin measure, 84% of the public who voted in favor because they saw the value in that project and the benefits that the resort tax has brought to our town.
People want to have nice things, they just don't want to pay for it.
That's right.
And Whitefish is full of very nice things. That leads us into our fun facts segment. Today's fun facts are brought to you by Thrivers Coffee. Thrivers Coffee is a delicious organic fair trade blend of beans roasted right here in Whitefish, Montana. Proceeds from every purchase of Thrivers Coffee goes towards ending human trafficking. To learn more about how Thrivers is doing this and to order Thrivers Coffee, visit thriverscoffee.com. We're going to have some fun facts about whitefish. Did you know the name whitefish comes from a Salish word meaning has whitefish, referring to Whitefish Lake? Long before the first Europeans came to Whitefish, Native American tribes inhabited the area, most notably the Kootenai. Or is it Kootenai?
Kootenai.
Kootenai, the Pend de Oriel, and the Bitterroot Salish. The town started a curfew siren in 1919 that they called the Ding Dong Ordinance.
Sound the alarm! The Canadians have come!
The Ding Dong Ordinance. I did not know that one. That's kind of hilarious.
That's a new one for me too.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with the Ding Dong Ordinance.
That's amazing. The 10 o'clock siren is just such a great sound.
Yeah, when we went through the redevelopment of Block 46, which is where the current City Hall and parking structure sit today, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not to incorporate the siren in the rebuild of City Hall. We had some folks that were pretty adamantly opposed to it, but I think the majority of residents really appreciate the fact that it's now with us again today.
Yeah.
So.
I remember when you guys brought it back and like it first started and people were like, it's too long.
Right.
Like people knew like it doesn't sound quite right. And so they had to
tweak it.
Yeah. That was so hilarious. So the community of Whitefish is a pretty amazing town. I mean, I grew up here. My mom had a shop in town back in the 80s and 90s, and it's always just been a really cool, like mom and pop shops, great food. We have some pretty amazing theater. We have 2 state-of-the-art performing arts centers with the O'Shaughnessy and the Performing Arts Center. Part of that success, I think, seems to have come, would you say has come from the ordinance against chain restaurants, or not chain restaurants, but like chains being able to come into Whitefish? Can you explain what that ordinance is about, if you're familiar with it, and what impact that has had as far as helping preserve like the culture of downtown Whitefish?
I think what's helped preserve the culture and the character of downtown, Whitefish, inevitably we're going to change. It's how you direct the change that's most important. And I think fortunately we've had, prior to this council and former councils, we've had many councils going back decades that were very forward and progressive thinking and how they envision the town growing. So we have a lot of progressive zoning ordinances in place. For example, formula retail is not allowed in the WB3 zoning district, which is our downtown business district, and we enacted that ordinance back in the day to prevent franchise businesses from landing in downtown and out competing all of our locally owned and operated mom and pop retail, restaurants, bars, etc. So we have very restrictive zoning in some sense, but I like to consider what we have done as very progressive in nature, and that even goes back to in the 80s when we adopted our zoning. We're one of few communities that actually restricted where short-term rentals can be legally operated. So we're very restrictive in that sense, and I think we're all probably very fortunate today for the fact that those leaders back in the day were forward-thinking enough to limit where we can operate STRs, because of course we know that that's really affecting the availability and the stock of affordable housing here in town.
That's gosh, the whole Airbnb thing is really, I mean, that's got to be a difficult thing to police though at the same time, because obviously there's so many Airbnbs in Whitefish, and obviously a lot of those probably are within that zoning area where you're not supposed to have them. So has that been policeable or enforceable?
It's difficult. Years ago we contracted with a consulting firm to do some enforcement actions, but that didn't bode any results. So right now we have a code enforcement officer that does from time to time, look on Airbnb and look up where certain addresses are advertising for weekly, nightly rentals where they're not allowed. Yeah. And we'll send, a notice to those landowners asking them to cease operations. Yeah. But it's tricky. I mean, there's probably several hundred illegally operating, STRs in town that we're still trying to crack down on, because of course it's affecting the supply of affordable housing in town.
And I have friends that do like rent out rooms and stuff, and obviously it is a great way for people that may be low income to make extra money. Yep. But at the same time, this is anecdotal, but I've talked to quite a few realtors who, during the housing boom sold to a lot of more, I guess, corporate interests that just came in to buy houses to do specifically that, where it's not just, someone that's coming to buy a home to live in. There's a lot of people that just bought homes to turn them into Airbnbs specifically.
That's right. I mean, they're viewed as income properties, versus a resident. It's almost as if we've transitioned our residential uses, neighborhoods in some locations into commercial investment properties. And it's been unfortunate to see where a lot of out-of-state second home buyers are coming in. They're either just sitting on the properties and they're sitting, vacant, 48 weeks a year and not going towards supporting workforce housing or affordable housing or even just rental housing, regardless of income. They're sitting vacant, or they're basically purchasing the homes in town and then they'll immediately build an accessory dwelling unit over a garage that they install on the property, and they'll rent one out and then leave the other vacant. So it's an ever growing problem. Hopefully we'll get a grip on it someday, but I'm not sure we're going to be able to move the needle on it.
Oh, that's tough. It is, yeah, it is hard because one of the things that makes Whitefish really amazing is the community. Like, we have such a tight knit community. And I think evidence of how tight knit our community was or is was evident in 2017. We had a fun little incident happen when I think you were in mayor. I think that was like right around the time. I mean, we're not trying to get political, but I think that was right around the time Trump got elected. And one of our more infamous residents started to stir the pot. Richard Spencer started to draw some unwanted attention to the town, and there was some pushback. And this other guy, Andrew Anglin, who is I guess a white supremacist that had a website where he basically got all of his trolls to try to come troll storm Whitefish, but also, I guess to that end, if you can talk about what happened, where there was this threat of a Nazi march on downtown Whitefish, and this is before Charlottesburg happened, where we didn't really understand how dangerous of a situation this was. But can you talk about what your experience was when this proposed Nazi march in Whitefish almost happened in 2017, and how did the city, which I find kind of comical, what did the city do to kind of help make sure that didn't happen?
So fortunately, because we have such an engaging and caring town, people came together first and foremost and said, this isn't going to happen in our town. We don't support these ideals. We don't support these values. And it was one of the reasons we immediately as a city adopted a resolution supporting inclusion, diversity, and non-discrimination. And that was read on the floor of the city council when this was just starting to flare up. And I give a lot of credit to the communications teams that we work with as consultants in town, of course our city staff that supported that resolution, and of course the Convention and Visitors Bureau that also partnered with us, as well as Big Mountain, to send a differing message out to the community and quite frankly the world, because we were getting national and international attention on this matter. But to your point about the organized march, one way we were able to manage that or dissuade that, so to speak, was the applicant was required to obtain a special event permit, and the individual just wasn't able to secure that permit because he couldn't meet the stipulations that were conditioned within the permit, some of which we crafted intentionally to try to keep this march from happening in downtown. But we were prepared. Our police force was engaged. They were coordinating with other local law enforcement organizations, including the sheriff's department. So we were ready. We were prepared. But certainly glad that didn't go down, because it's not the message we want to send to the nation, because it's not the community that we are, and we certainly do not support the values that those individuals were purporting that we represent here in Whitefish, and never will we.
Yeah, that's amazing. And luckily that week that it was supposed to happen, it was like sub-zero weather, and there was like not a counter protest, but a lot of the community came together to have an event.
Love lives here.
Love lives here, yeah.
Yep.
And they braved that weather. It was like, I was working at Spotted Bear Spirits that day when it happened, and I remember opening up and it was like 5 below, maybe 10 below, which is a nippy winter for us if you're a local here. But to imagine a bunch of skinheads coming up from the Bay Area, which is like kind of strange to think that there's skinheads in the Bay Area, but coming up in a bus and landing in Whitefish was 15 below. I was like, that just doesn't sound like it was really going to go well anyway.
No. The one benefit that did come from that, if there is one, is the fact that it once again showed how the solidarity within our town. All these organizations and individuals came together to say, no, this isn't going to happen. And it also forced us to start thinking about crisis communications. And we actually, at that time, started developing a crisis communications plan that we have since adopted. So it provided not only the public but city staff and the council to actually receive some tangible training, including elected officials, on how to manage things when crises do occur. And of course we've had our share of crises here in town. Hopefully they're behind us, but I'm sure there's one on the horizon.
What kind of technology has the city implemented to make it more modern?
I think one of the biggest moves we ever made to create a more efficient form of government that's more transparent and available to the residents was consolidating all of city services within one building, the new city hall. And of course that was a challenging project to move forward. There were folks that felt that we should do something less expensive on the outskirts of town, but we felt pretty strongly that the hub of our municipal services should reside in the downtown.
Yeah.
And that, you know, our government should be part of town, not isolated to one corner or another. But just consolidating all of the public services that the city government does provide, I think, was instrumental in streamlining the efficiencies of government and making the public more involved with the public process, because all the departments prior to City Hall being built were spread throughout town, so it was very inefficient. But since then, just with the reconsolidation of the departments, you know, just expanding our GIS capabilities, we've brought on board an information technology specialist as well, and we're continuing to work on other, you know, efficiencies throughout the departments to help, you know, bottom line, keep costs down for the taxpayer, the users. So,
and it's such a beautiful building. You're right. It's great to have that just like in the heart of Whitefish. That's where it should be. And it just feels like right being there. And it's kind of become like a very popular place for protesters to gather, or not even protesters, but people expressing their First Amendment right to free speech. And we've seen some very colorful protests out there and people advocating for different things, and some large groups, some single groups. So
no, it's become a good gathering spot, City Hall. And
you
know, we're just so fortunate that we were able to get that project underway when we did. I believe at the end of the day, that project cost about $22 million. About 8 or 9 of that was actual City Hall. The balance of about 12 to 13 million was the parking garage, which now provides over 220, you know, spaces to help support our downtown businesses. But that entire project was paid for with tax increment financing, which is absolutely remarkable for a town of our size. I mean, we have one of the most successful TIF districts statewide, despite the fact that it just recently sunset. We only had to levy about $1 million through a special improvement district to the local downtown businesses that actually will benefit from the parking that has now been provided. Because the intent of that parking garage was to provide for employee parking in large part. To get employees that park on Central Avenue and the arterial streets out of the neighborhoods off Central Avenue and into the garage to free up that parking for consumers.
That's great.
Because every space on that downtown block translates to revenue for our downtown businesses. So I believe we currently lease about 65 of the 220 spaces plus or minus to local businesses that then provide their employees, you know, parking opportunities for their shifts.
So that's great.
It's been largely successful.
Oh, I love it. It's great.
And now Kalispell's talking about building a garage. So
it's so funny that we got a parking garage before Kalispell did, considering Kalispell's like a much bigger city.
Absolutely.
That's cool. Kalispell's catching up. They're really turning a new leaf. I'm excited.
They're transforming. It's really cool to watch. I mean, you know, the mayor down there, Mark Johnson's doing a fabulous job, as well as his council.
It's going to be fun in 10 years to see everything kind of come together, and from the train rail trail system they're doing, and great.
Well, it's
great
interesting
drinks.
looking at what happened here in Whitefish back in the 80s when the Mountain Mall was developed. You saw the flight of downtown businesses to the mall, because that was the new model. Go shopping at the mall. You don't need to go downtown anymore. Well, we look at what's happened now in Whitefish, and all the businesses are now wanting to relocate to the downtown. I don't think we have one vacant storefront in downtown.
No.
And you look down south to Kalispell, and what happened with a lot of the strip development, you know, north and south of Kalispell, is a lot of those businesses vacated from downtown as well. And now you're seeing the revitalization of those businesses, and it's really exciting to see for Kalispell.
Oh, that's so great. But what's going to happen to those, not just one, but 2 malls? There's the old mall, and then the new one. And then who owns the mall here in Whitefish? Is that, do you know?
I don't know the current owner.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
How closely do you guys work with the ski resort?
We have a good relationship with the resort, dating back to when Dan Graves was, you know, CEO. Fred Jones, when he was CEO. We have to. I mean, because a lot of the planning that we do at the city level, there's a nexus with what's happening at Big Mountain, of course. Nick Palumas has done an exceptional job stepping into the CEO role. He serves, of course, on numerous local boards, as did Dan Graves. You know, Dan sat on the the Chamber of Commerce board. So regular interaction. A number of years ago, the Mountain petitioned to hook up to city sewer. When the Big Mountain Road was reconstructed, we extended sewer up to the Big Mountain Village, and we entered into a sewer agreement to where as early as 2023, the city can legally annex, on the Big Mountain. They had to sign a waiver of protest to annexation as part of that sewer hookup. Certainly the city's not prepared to annex Big Mountain. There's a whole host of studies and feasibility analyses we would need to do in terms of being able to demonstrate that we can provide the level of services we do in town to the Big Mountain Village. So don't get freaked out, folks. We're not looking to annex the Big Mountain here in 2023, but we have a good relationship, certainly with the mountain. Of course, one thing we're constantly struggling with as the mountain is the insufficiencies of Wisconsin Avenue. Yeah. It's a secondary state highway. The city receives minimal funding on an annual basis from the Montana Department of Transportation to do chip seals, overlays, asphalt, snowplow maintenance, sanding, etc. So what really needs to happen on Wisconsin Avenue to not only help traffic and circulation in town, but also visitation to Big Mountain is the addition of a turning lane. And we're so far from that at this point, and I don't mean to be pessimistic, but we don't have the right-of-way in place to even construct a street section that would accommodate a turning lane, much like we did on Highway 93 West. Heading west out of town with the addition of the turning lane, and how that's just really helped the businesses as well as traffic circulation heading west of town. That same model would certainly apply to Wisconsin Avenue, and we've engaged with our local representatives, Dave Fern. The state's certainly aware of the deficiencies with the highway. We're also dealing with deficiencies on Highway 93 South. And it's just a matter of, when those federal funds are going to become available to where we can get a project nominated by the Department of Transportation to help get these major capital improvement projects, moving forward. So I would say right now, like in terms of, where we need to be focused with Big Mountain, it's really on, lobbying the legislature and the state to pay some attention to the safety concerns on Wisconsin Avenue in hopes that in the next, 8 to 12 years, we can hopefully have a project, in place.
I remember a while ago, I was speaking with a previous city manager about an event I was potentially planning, and they were talking about the congestion, obviously, that happens on Wisconsin and Spokane, people coming and going, especially in the winter. There was talks about trying to do a bypass, and I just can't even imagine how much work and effort that would take. But, I mean, it seems like there's got to be something. I mean, just going down Baker in the middle of the afternoon, it's like cars lined up all the way from the stop sign all the way down to the traffic light. It's kind of crazy. So are there any like big ideas for how that can be solved, or at least addressed, to ease the tension on the congestion at all? Or
well, the feasibility of a bypass at this point, that's the horse has left the barn. I mean, we looked at that a number of years ago, and there was just no feasible route that the city could pursue with the Department of Transportation. Unfortunately, because the Kalispell bypass has been largely successful. But what we've worked on is a comprehensive transportation plan for the city. We actually just adopted our updated transportation plan this past Monday night at City Council that'll help guide transportation needs and improvements through the year 2040. A lot of those projects remain unfunded. We acknowledge that. But without a plan, you can't plan. And without a plan, you can't seek funding. So we're glad that we adopted that plan. But to address traffic and circulation in downtown, we developed a downtown model as to what would be the most efficient way to address traffic and circulation given our existing infrastructure. And essentially what that plan contemplates is a couplet design, to where we would have 2 northbound lanes and 1 southbound lane from 13th Street north to 2nd Street, essentially where the Firebrand and the middle school is. And then, obviously you have Highway 2, 93 through town, which was just improved, a number of years ago through a federal Tiger grant that, put a lot of the pedestrian improvements into the downtown, the bulb outs, the lighting, the awnings, the sidewalk extensions, the parking. And so that would remain largely unchanged through the immediate downtown on 93 or 2nd Street. And then on Baker, it contemplates 2 southbound lanes and 1 northbound lane. And so it's referred to as a couplet design. And it's gained the support of the Department of Transportation. We agree on most of the concepts that went into that plan. And we're hoping that in the near future that we can have those projects realized. Of course, the big limiting factor is, the crossing of the Whitefish River to make that couplet, to complete the couplet. And that's going to be a big lift, financially, in order to build a bridge that'll span the Whitefish River, to provide that contraflow.
Would you have to do two bridges? Because you have it would just be on Spokane, correct?
Spokane, the two culverts,
Yep.
2 or 3 culverts right now, that would be scheduled to be replaced. And that would be that's a state highway, federal highway. It's in the national highway system. So that would be paid for by the Department of Transportation, but the crossing over the Whitefish River, I don't know how that would ever get funded solely by the state. But it would be a heavy lift, and I'm not sure that's ever going to become a reality.
Oh, man.
So we're doing the best we can.
Yeah.
At least we're looking at transportation in its entirety, holistically, for the entire town. Of course, what's very limiting in town in terms of traffic flow are east-west connections.
Right.
Those are extremely limited. So not only north-south connections, but also east-west.
Man, maybe we can get some of that infrastructure money from Biden's new infrastructure plan.
Yep.
Yeah. So what's going on Spokane right now? Ton of construction over there. Is that just water mains or something, or drainage? Yep.
So that's from 13th Street north to 2nd Street. It's an old cast iron water main that we've detected leaking for a number of years, significant leakage. So that line, which you can ask our public works director, but I imagine it's in the order of 70 to 80 years old, is being replaced.
Great.
And some of that project's being funded through state and federal loans, as well as our resort tax. People have asked me, why can't this construction happen at night to minimize impacts on traffic? The reason being the bids would come back twice as much. And we just can't, frankly, afford it. We certainly don't want to put that burden on our taxpayers. So we've done everything we can, from short-term and long-term loans to leveraging a portion of our resort tax to help pay for that. But it's a project that's going to take a few months. At the end of the day, we'll have a full overlay on Spokane Avenue, new striping, some sidewalk improvements and pedestrian improvements, as well as you approach the downtown 7th Street north to 2nd.
Nice. That's great.
So patience.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's other ways around it.
Sure.
Yeah. If you're a local,
the Baker bypass.
The Baker bypass. Yep. Or Columbia around.
Right.
Shh, actually, I didn't say that. I'm going to bleep that out.
Well, Columbia was designed. It's referred to as a collector street.
Okay.
So it was designed to collect and route traffic. As an important north-south collector, much like Baker Avenue.
That's great.
But of course now people are using that to bypass Spokane. So obviously those folks that live on Columbia are being negatively impacted. So hopefully that's going to be short-lived.
Cool. Especially come Halloween. That's when a trick-or-treat street.
Absolutely.
Now the other big issue is sustainable housing. There's some new nonprofits that are popping up. I know the Whitefish Community Foundation is trying to address this. Everyone's trying to address it. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has an idea how to solve it.
Yep.
But I don't know if people realize that the city of Whitefish had a program in the works, but in 2021, according to an article I think that came out of Helena, city zoning laws that require builders to include some affordable homes in developments are now banned in Montana under a bill signed by Governor Greg Gianforte. House Bill 259 passed the legislature on largely party lines. Votes with Republicans in favor, prohibits cities from requiring housing developers to provide housing for specific income levels or at specific prices. It wipes out inclusionary zoning in Bozeman and Whitefish, which had put the programs in place in 2018. Housing developers in each city have had to include a percentage of affordable homes in their projects, or if they didn't want to build smaller homes, make a cash payment or land donations. How did that bill affect what Whitefish was working on to create affordable housing for Whitefish?
It was a significant drawback. So we saw this problem coming with workforce and affordable housing years ago. Perhaps we should have jumped on it sooner. back in 2016, we commissioned with a consultant to complete what we refer to as a housing needs assessment. And back in 2016, 6 years later, that report concluded that over 50% of Whitefish's workforce in commutes from other areas, whether it's Kalispell, Columbia Falls, or the county, and that given current population trends and needs, we were already in 2016 at a deficit of about 900 affordable housing units at that time.
Wow, this is in 2016.
That's 6 years ago, and the problem's only manifested itself, obviously.
Holy smokes.
And so we've recently refreshed that housing needs assessment, so we'll be distributing that information, but the problem's certainly gotten worse. We haven't really moved the needle. But what we did under that study is we did adopt a local inclusionary zoning ordinance that required new development to set aside or deed restrict a certain percentage of the housing units as deed restricted for affordability and workers. And we were targeting anywhere from about 60 to 110% of the average median income or household income in the 59937 zip code. But unfortunately, we started seeing some momentum. We started to see some units come online through some development proposals, but unfortunately that House bill did, kill our IZ program and essentially made us, backpedal and rethink our whole program in its entirety. I'm always going to advocate that government certainly can't solve the affordable housing, problem. We can do our part, through impact fee reimbursements, waivers, other deviations to zoning codes such as parking requirements, height restrictions, parkland dedication, things like that to help incentivize density within our downtown, which is what we are trying to encourage, so that we don't see development and our agricultural lands, rezoned to higher, densities, which is logically going to happen anyway. But the more we can infill in town, and a portion of those need to be affordable and deed restricted, the better. But the legislature certainly didn't help the problem, and they stripped our ability to control our own destiny. And at the end of the day, I think those that live and work in Whitefish know what's best for Whitefish, not folks that are sitting, 3 hours over in Helena.
Man, and the irony is that Gianforte just launched an affordable housing task force.
Yes, he did.
Oh, man. I mean, I hate to get political, but it's like kind of too late.
Right.
Because what can you do? Just throw a study out that says, this is a problem. We're not really sure how to do it.
Right.
That doesn't compromise, people that want to have the freedom to build what they want, however they want, versus, what that does to people that can't. I mean, 2016, there was 900 people that were coming into Whitefish that worked here that lived elsewhere. That's mind-blowing.
Yep, it is.
And it's only gotten so much worse. So,
and it's also gotten worse because places like Columbia Falls are now, I mean, their average median home price increased at a rate more rapidly from a percentage standpoint than Whitefish, because those homes and those properties were at a lower value when this trend started. And so places like Columbia Falls are no longer affordable, and certainly land in the county's not getting any less expensive. So it's a problem that doesn't only face Whitefish, but it's affecting the entire state, but it's affecting the entire county, and that's where we can hopefully make a difference. And I would compel the county commissioners and the other mayors in Columbia Falls and Kalispell to help band together to help solve this problem, because it doesn't end at municipal boundaries. I think it's really a problem that can be solved if all the municipalities get together and try to solve this on a more holistic level, much like transportation needs within the county.
Could theoretically, could the city build an apartment complex that was just for affordable housing or allocated a certain amount? Is that legal to do something like that?
We can do that, but at the end of the day, it comes down to land and who's going to pay for it. We were successful in developing the LIHTC project over on Edgewood. When you go over the viaduct, that development on the left behind the old O'Shaughnessy building, I think that's a 40-unit development. We partnered with a private owner to get that property purchased at a significant rebate, and we are fortunate to have been awarded a low-income housing tax credit fund from the state. We were one of, I believe, 7 communities, and that was fully funded by a LIHTC grant. So that's been a great success story. And we've looked at city-owned properties throughout town to see where we can, offer land for affordable housing development. A good example being the city's former snow lot.
Oh, right.
Just north and east of the middle school.
Yeah.
Where that whole block was traditionally used by the city for snow storage. Well, I think we can find another location to put snow, and basically we've transitioned that property to the Whitefish Housing Authority, our nonprofit affordable housing, wing of the city, so to speak.
That's great.
To where, we're hoping to get those units in that project vertical here in the next couple years, and I believe that's going to deliver another 20 to 22 units, that all of which will be deed restricted. So our involvement as a city there is the dedication of the land, and if you can take the land value and the land cost out of these projects, I think we can make some momentum with affordable housing in town.
That's great. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, it might be small victories, but
Right.
it's better than nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And of course, then generous folks. For example, the developer out on Monaghan.
Yeah.
Who he's developing a really
Yeah.
nice, I think very tasteful development. A majority of which of those units are now affordable for a certain AMI for workers in town.
That's great.
So.
And there is definitely a affordable free housing for all the train kids in some of O'Shaughnessy's old places.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Love that guy. He's talk about a character of Whitefish that you see him come out every once in a while. I've
never met him.
Oh, he's a trip. He's
yeah.
actually he's a good family friend. He's a very generous, kind man, just a little eccentric.
Sure.
I used to do some work for him before he really let the property go next to the Northern, his little shack right there.
Yeah.
He would pay me to go just clean it up and stuff when I was a little kid. Always would pay me in silver. The legend of him paying in silver is true.
Yeah.
Yep. I've got a whole collection of silver dollars from 1880. Yeah, so funny. Awesome. So what are your plans? What do you like to do when you're not doing all this amazing hard work? What do you do for fun?
Oh, I'm probably similar to what most people do.
Yeah.
Skiing, biking, hiking, fly fishing, just getting out in the outdoors and enjoying the wonderful places that surround us. I also have a place up in the North Fork of the Flathead. So
awesome.
Pretty close to the Canadian border. I won't disclose the physical location.
Dang.
So I spend a lot of time up in the North Fork when I'm not working or running the city, so to speak. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Man, you got to be way up there.
Yeah, it's pretty far up there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we just had a wedding for my good friend Brad a couple weeks ago. So
cool.
It was fortunately the smoke cleared out and we had a beautiful day. So
that's great. Yeah. Awesome. Well, John, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on our first episode of Hello Whitefish, and hopefully we'll have you back again.
Can I share one closing comment?
Absolutely.
I think this will resonate with the start of our conversation, but I'm working down in the town of Helmville on the Mannix Ranch right now through my private company, River Design Group, on a aquatic habitat restoration project. And one of the younger contractors who grew up, he's probably in his 20s. He was born and raised in Sealy, Montana. And when I came on site about 2 weeks ago, he had heard that I was mayor of Whitefish, and he came up to me and he said, "Why would you, in God's sake, ever want to be a mayor?" And I thought about that for a while, and I said to him, when I moved here back in 1995 and my friends moved here, we didn't move here with the intent to change things. We came here to get involved and to respect the locals and the culture that we were moving to. And things have changed. I think we have a lot of outside influence that's coming. And so to your earlier question, folks, get involved, run for office, run for a volunteer board. And I told this one contractor after I pondered his question for a couple of days, I said, you can control what happens to your town. Don't let others control what happens to your town. Guide it, get involved. And that's the reason I serve as mayor. And that's why I encourage people to run for council and get involved.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm so happy you're our mayor, man.
Thank you.
I know it can't be an easy job.
It's fun.
It's fun. That's great.
It is fun.
Yeah.
But not always easy.
Yeah. Such is life, as it should be.
Exactly.
Yeah, just like skiing on on East Rim. It's fun, but it's hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you again, John.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Awesome.